Alex Mbugua, Chief Financial Officer, Kenya Airways. You've just delivered the full year results. It was a full year loss. How would you characterize the results that we've just seen?
Obviously, it is never the joy, and it is never pleasurable for a CFO to announce the sort of results that we did today. But I think we were able to articulate the reasons why we did not perform well. And really the main reason was that we did not achieve the levels of revenue that we wanted to, for the reasons that we gave, and maybe we can talk about that a bit later. And then we did mention that the fuel costs were significantly high this year. So given given those two realities, obviously we are not happy with the result, but we are able to explain why and what we are doing about it. And we are looking forward to a much better year.
Actually, you were quite optimistic. You said you were quite bullish, I think, in the presentation about the next year. But just going back to the previous, the full year you've just released, revenues were down just under about 10%, I think. Fuel costs take up a huge component. You were talking about a potential fuel trading company. Is that a likely scenario, you think?
Yes, the revenues were actually down 15%, and the main reason for that was a combination of both. We didn't achieve the sort of passenger levels that we expected, and as we said, there were many reasons. We were mainly hit. The main decline was actually from Europe, and that was because of the Eurozone crisis, and then we had lots of travel advisories against Kenya. At some stage, you had 5. And that obviously affected traffic flow from Europe into Africa. The Al-Shabaab situation, the war with Somalia and the Al-Shabaab did not improve things. And then the political situation, we had a fairly prolonged electioneering process that hit us towards the end of the year. So the combination of all those factors had a negative impact on the revenue. And then on the cost, as we already said earlier, our main cost is fuel, and the fuel prices were significantly higher next year. Now, if you look at those two scenarios, in the new year, we now have we've had a successful, peaceful election, thank God. There was a lot of naysayers who thought that we would not be able to do that, but we thank God that we had a peaceful election. And the government seems to be settling down well, so we have begun to see a significant improvement in traffic, particularly from Europe, coming back into Africa. The Al-Shabaab situation is also settling down. There seems to be some semblance of order getting into Somalia. So the things that were negative last year are reversing themselves. From a fuel perspective, we saw a 10% decline in fuel price just in April alone, coincidentally being the first month of our year. So the combination of the revenue and cost scenarios that we are seeing now can only lend themselves to a much better performance. Let me give you a quick example. Titus did mention the fact that we are renewing our fleet. In fact, by September, we'll have received our 10th Embraer. The reality is that if you compare the fuel burn of an Embraer vis-a-vis the fuel burn of a classic 737-300, which is being replaced by the Embraer, there's a difference of 20% on the amount of fuel you burn per hour. And that translates to almost $40 million of saving year on year. Wow. So that's a huge amount of money. I
think last week you were describing it to me as a double whammy at the moment. Yeah. That's going against you. That is the less efficient aeroplane, the higher fuel burn. Yes. And you're saying that inverts itself quite considerably going forward as you refresh the fleet. Do you just want to tell investors the impact of that?
Yeah. When you pack a 767 that is 20 years old, that is tired, next to a brand new A330 from Emirates to Dubai, obviously a lot of passengers would prefer to fly the more efficient, more comfortable and newer A330 compared to our 767. So from a product perspective, the coming in of the 787 from March next year will mean two things. One, we have a better product, which will therefore attract more passengers, which will improve on our revenue situation. On the other flip side of the coin, the 787 fuel burn is 20% better than the 767. The maintenance cost is 35% better. So it's a double whammy. You have an improvement on revenue because you have a better product, and you have an improvement on costs and economies because of the efficiencies that the new equipment have. So while we see this coming year to March 14 being a good year, we expect the year to March 15 to be a bumper year, because you'll have replaced all the old classics, which we'll do this year, and by next year, 6 out of 10 of our wide bodies are old 767s. And by the end of March 15, they'll all have gone and been replaced by 787s. So we are very excited about our future. With the promise, the economic promise that country is presenting, you know that in the last year or so, we've had 30 multinationals moving their headquarters into Kenya. Kenya is an economic region of the hub. With the activities in Southern Sudan, Tanzania, Uganda, I mean, the whole region is abuzz economically, and all these people will come through Nairobi. So we are really very excited.
Now, looking at the second half, there was a significant reduction in the cost base. You took a lot of cost, personnel cost, I think, and a few other costs. It seems the organization now is much leaner. It's been a tough year, but you've used it to make. Is that how you characterize it? I mean,
crises are not good. But I remember when I was in school, my professor told me that you must make use of a crisis. You must take advantage. And the good thing about crises sometimes is that they teach you where you're probably, not as lean and mean as you should be. And therefore, we have had a very hard look at how we do things. We have a world-class operation going on at the moment. And one of the areas that we have identified was, of course, the headcount. We were able to run the business with 800 people less year on year. We've also looked at other areas like, the hotels, the catering, and so on. And we'll continue to do that because given the competitive nature and the low margin in our business, while you continue to put efforts to get the passengers coming through, you also obviously have to look at the costs and make sure that you're managing those. And I can say that we're getting better and better. If you look at the overheads, we were able to cut overheads up to 1.2 billion shillings year on year, which is remarkable given our kind of business. So yes, we will continue looking at costs.
So you feel when the rebound comes, the rebound should feed down to the bottom line quite dramatically, right? Now, Alex, Kenya Airways, Pride of Africa, it's the African franchise seems to me to be the jewel in the Kenya Airways crown. And how can you describe and characterize what's happening in that jewel of Kenya Airways? Do you have the wherewithal? Are you connecting all the dots through Nairobi? Are you seeing more competition turn up? Do you think you're well positioned to ride this Africa rising narrative, more Africans traveling and so forth?
When we did the rights issue, we went around the world talking about our project Mawingu, which is our 10-year plan. As we say today in the presentation, we've just renewed it. Now we have the project Mawingu 2, which is the next 10 years. And the reason why we think from a strategic perspective, the reason why we believe we have a lot of competitive advantage is because if you look at the economic GDP growth globally, the top 10 countries are either in Africa or Asia, particularly China and India. Our strategy is very clear. We are not ambiguous about this. Our strategy going forward is to connect Africa, Asia, and China. Now, if you consider where we are geographically in Nairobi, you cannot find a better place on earth to actually connect Africa with China and India. The reason being that Nairobi being in the center of Africa, we can get to pretty much everywhere else in Africa with a narrow body, mop up all that passengers into Nairobi, put them onto wide bodies into Asia and Africa. In our industry, aviation growth is very closely tied to economic growth. So when you have two regions which are growing heavily economically, and there's a lot of activity going between Africa and Asia, then clearly there's going to be a big growth of traffic, which we are positioned to take advantage of. Just a quick example, in Africa last year, the total aviation business aviation passenger numbers was 20 million in the whole of Africa. Africa is the biggest continent in the world. You can actually fit in most of the rest of the world into Africa. Now, given that reality and given the fact that Africa is pretty much underserved in terms of infrastructure, in terms of railway, in terms of road, it creates a huge opportunity. This is what we call low-hanging fruit. And with our 44th destination being Livingstone that we opened last week, we are by far the largest airline in Africa. And our ambition by the end of next year is to fly into every African capital. Now, all that traffic comes through to Nairobi. We are bringing in the wide bodies. We are bringing 777 this November. And all that goes into Asia. We've also signed codeshares with Etihad, which creates extra capacity across Africa and Asia. We have also signed a codeshare with China Southern. So everything is sort of, all the pieces are beginning to fit in the puzzle. And we think that in the next 3 years we will be a very profitable business.